Hey guys, welcome back to the garage. It's week 5 of the rebuild, and this week we're going to finish taking off all the body panels from the 280Z. I actually started removing some of the fender bolts and screws in the previous weeks, but I started encountering so many broken bolts and strip screws that I stopped and ordered some hopefully helpful tools to facilitate the process. We'll see how that works out. Throughout last week, I kept dripping liquid wrench on all of the rusty fasteners, but I don't know if that'll help much because a lot of the screws are already stripped. So I guess it's time to introduce some specialty tools. So we have a manual impact driver, which will be our first plan of attack. Then we have the speed out if the impact driver doesn't work. And I also ordered a good quality set of cobalt drill bits if all else fails, so we can just drill everything out. It actually took me a little while to get the hang of using the manual impact driver. There is a bit of a learning curve if you're using it for the first time. The trick is that when you're holding it, always have it twisted as much as possible counterclockwise so that when you strike it, it doesn't kind of jiggle in place. So the speed out does work, although I personally think that the drill side of the bits are complete garbage. I think you're much better off using an actual cobalt drill bit to drill the hole and just using the extractor side to grab onto the screw to pull it out. Even if you're being as careful as possible, it's really inevitable that you're going to break some screws removing the fender. Sometimes you're able to remove them cleanly, sometimes it's going to break. I guess it's just the nature of working on these cars. It ended up being a really good idea that I ordered both the speed out and the manual impact driver because both are useful in different situations. For instance, sometimes the fastener is in a location that is quite flexible or flimsy that you can't just hammer on it. Even if you can, it is helpful having the extractor bits as backup because it doesn't work 100% of the time, but you kind of want to try the manual impact driver first because using the fast out obviously destroys the fastener. Alright, sorry, so that's enough about that. I'll walk you through how to remove all of the front body panels now. It actually took me a little while to figure out everything that I needed to do to remove the fender because the restoration book was not at all helpful here. And the process is identical on both sides, so let's just walk through the passenger side. So you'll want to go along the edge where both the headlight bucket and the fender meets the hood and remove all the screws and bolts you see. I think there's about 7 or 8 of them, including the rubber hood bumpers. Also remove these 2 bolts that are near the radiator support that hold the headlight bucket in place. You'll want to pull the fender and the headlight bucket at the same time. There are another 2 bolts that hold the headlight bucket to the lower valance. Or is it valence? I think it's valance, but those are pretty easily accessible, shouldn't be a problem. Alright, so there's 2 more screws in the cowl panel area, and these are the easiest to strip or break, so try to be careful here. You'll also find 1 more bolt in the upper door jamb area, and 2 more bolts down here near the wheel well. I only saw 1 bolt down here originally, but turns out there was another one that I had to dig out of Bondo and paint. The bolt came out without much fighting once I was able to chisel enough space for the socket to fit in. And the next step is removing the plastic wheel well lining, which I'm pretty sure is specific to 280Zs. I don't think 240s or 260s came with these things. But it is pretty easy to remove. I think about 5 to 7 bolts hold it in, and they're easy to identify. But this thing was so cracked and crunchy that it just cannot be restored, and as with most things plastic that I'm pulling out of the car, it's probably not going back in. Alright, so you can take out the side signal light and the headlight assembly with the body panels if you would like, but for whatever reason I'm choosing to take them out first. You'll at least want to unplug them from the main harness obviously before you remove them, and 4 bolts hold in the headlight from the back and 2 screws hold the signal light to the fender if you have one. The last step is to loosen the fasteners that hold the different body panels in place, and ideally you'll want to separate the body panels so you can take them out one by one. but these things are so rusted stuck that I found it impossible to undo them without bending the panels. And they're not easily accessible using an impact driver, and even if you could get at them, the nuts that are welded to the body panels are more likely to break first than the bolts coming loose. So I'm just choosing to take off everything at the same time and trying to separate them afterwards. With the front body panels removed, it's again starting to look like a bomb went off in the garage, so I'll need to visit the storage unit again. But before I do that, we can once again take a closer look at the condition of the frame, and it's really no wonder why all of the fender fasteners were so rusted stuck. Look at all of the dirt and rotten leaves and sticks you can find right along the weather stripping. But I think I did get lucky. I didn't find any significant rust issues anywhere along the fender, although I do have a fair bit of grinding and cleaning to do. Now that we're more or less done with the front, let's move to the back. Again, the restoration book was not detailed enough to be helpful here, so I did have to take my time going back and forth looking for different fasteners. We'll start with the license plate obviously, and the light assembly right above it. We can also take off the backing plate. The taillight assembly will need to come out next, and I thought maybe the black trim around the taillights could be removed separately, but it can only be loosened from the taillights after the whole thing comes out. So you'll need to remove some plastic push pins from above first, and then get to 5 or 6 nuts that hold the entire assembly in place. After that, you should take some pictures of the different connections before you disconnect anything and pull out the entire assembly in one piece. Don't forget the gasket around the taillight. Most likely it'll be very brittle, but try to take it out in one piece so you can use it to trace out a new piece later on. After removing the other taillight assembly, I moved on to removing the back bumper. And I won't really go through the steps here because 1, not everyone has these, and 2, I think it's more or less self-explanatory. There are some bolts that you have to remove from the bottom, and some nuts you have to access from the top in the trunk area. But after that, the bumper should come loose. You can remove the rubber end caps separately if you want to preserve them, but mine were ripped already, so I'm just tearing them off. If you do want to save the end caps, the proper way to release it is to pry off the rubber disc to get access to the bolt underneath. So now we'll remove the rear hatch, and you can start by simply pulling off the 2 defroster wires at the top, and then you can unbolt the hatch from the 2 hinges and then the 2 struts. My mistake here was there's actually 2 of them. 1, trying to do this by myself because the hatch is a bit heavier than it looks, and 2, detaching the hinges from the car rather than detaching the hatch from the hinge. It's much easier to detach the hatch from the hinge. Wow, that's a tongue twister. It's much easier to detach the hatch from the hinge first and then try to remove the hinges separately. Anyway, with the help of the engine hoist, I was able to remove it by myself, although I did nearly drop the whole thing. We're trying to get to the antenna on the driver's side, so you'll need to start by removing the plastic dome panel housing the seatbelt assembly. And to pull the panel fasteners, push in the middle of the fastener to push the rod out, and then you can jiggle the fastener out. I don't know why this one is white, all the other ones are black. After that, you'll want to detach the gas strut by removing a nut from behind the plate. Don't try to remove the welded bolt, just get at it from behind. After the strut is gone, you can undo a few screws to remove the rear plastic panel. All of the panels seem to be cracked and broken. I have no idea what my plan is to replace them. I probably don't need a plan. I don't think I'll replace them at all. Alright, so you can now see the antenna assembly, which you just need to unbolt from the bracket in the inside and then loosen the assembly from the outside. You do need an adjustable wrench to do this, but it should be fairly straightforward. And speaking of things that are not getting replaced, this isn't going back either. It's 2019, I have Bluetooth and a smartphone. And while you're on this side, you can also remove the rear indicator light assembly, which is just 2 screws and unplugging a couple of wires. And you can actually see the car's original color underneath this. I guess the previous painting job didn't bother with removing anything. Go ahead and repeat the same process on the passenger side to remove the strut and the plastic panels. And the only difference is when you remove the panel, instead of an antenna assembly, you'll find a metal plate that is held in by a few screws, and beneath that, a reservoir tank. And I don't know exactly how this works, but I think the basic principle is that it's a separate tank that allows the main tank to breathe, and it routes the gasoline vapors back to the main tank. I'll have to do some research to figure out if this needs to go back or not. Anyway, to remove this, you'll need to go back to the outside of the car. So remove the gas door first, which is just a couple of screws. And then after that, you can remove the 4 bolts that hold the filler neck in place. And the filler neck is connected to both the reservoir tank and obviously the main tank. After disconnecting the various hoses, I just ended up pulling the filler neck out along with the reservoir tank. And I won't really explain how everything is connected here because there's this helpful diagram that's probably more helpful than I can be. All the components are in great shape here, so I shouldn't have much trouble reusing both the tank and the filler neck. All of the rubber hoses do need to be replaced though. So that concludes this week's rebuild update, but now it's time to do our GoFundMe shoutouts. First up, we have Nick Ermo, who donated $25. I don't know much about you, Nick, because you didn't say anything, but I get that you're a man of few words, and I appreciate your support. And then there was an anonymous donation for $50. This is a very regular viewer. I appreciate you not only for the donation, but your general activity in the channel, and let's continue chatting. Third, we have Rand Voorhees, hopefully I'm not butchering that name, who donated $25, who apparently has been watching a lot of my older content to get his 240Z engine up and running again. Glad to be of help, and thanks for your donation, really appreciate it. And those were the 3 donations this week. If any of you guys feel like supporting me, this project, or the channel in general, if you like what you see, please do visit the GoFundMe page. I don't get to have sponsors, but I do get to have, you know, great, generous viewers like you who do support the channel, and I sincerely appreciate that. So that's it for this week. I'll see you guys next week. Talk to you guys later.